Now, I don't mean to scare anybody, but I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason. He's in this movie, my favorite one in the franchise. We're going to review it next on Drew Reviews. Welcome back to the channel, guys, and it is a Friday. From now here in September all the way up until Friday, October the 13th, I'm going to put out a new Friday the 13th review for you guys, and today is my favorite one of the entire bunch. It's Friday the 13th Part 2, directed by Steve Miner. This one came out, just a few months after the first one, and boy, is it a glorious movie. So the plot of this movie is basically, it's 5 years after the events of the first movie. And so Camp Crystal Lake has been shut down, the actual camp that is, and they're getting ready to start back up on the other side of the lake. And of course, the counselors are coming in for counselor training. They're led by Paul and his love interest, Jenny, several other very good counselors in this movie. But basically, just one after another, they start getting picked off, in, traditional slasher fashion. But yeah, that's the basic plot for this movie. And pretty much the rest of the movies going forward. It's keep it simple, stupid. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. So what I like about this movie and why it's at the top for me is Jason doesn't come in until about halfway through the movie, really. He's there in pockets, but a lot of time is spent on the character development of these kids. In the beginning of the movie, you've got Jeff and Sandra, and I can't watch this without just thinking he looks like John Bon Jovi in this thing. It's almost distracting. Does anybody else get that when they watch Jeff and Sandra in a scene? But, they're driving up for their counselor training, and they meet up with Ted. He's the prankster in this one. He's like Ned in the first one and Shelley in the next one. And I think I like him. Of all of them, I think I might like him the most and his corny jokes. But after a run-in at a phone booth with Crazy Ralph, of course, who tells them that they're all doomed, uh, you have Ted slip the wrecker guy some money, and he hauls Jeff's truck up, and it's one of his pranks. They get to the camp, and you meet all of these characters, and they have that great scene, that I was teasing at the beginning of this review where they sat around the campfire. And I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason. Just a great bit of storytelling there, and I love how they kind of go around the campfire and see everybody's face as Paul's telling that story. The lead counselor Paul, he's pretty good in this movie. His love interest is Jenny Fields, who is played by Amy Steele, and Amy Steele, without a doubt, the character she portrays is my favorite final girl in any of these movies. I guess you could say Megan from Part 6 would be close, and like Trish from 4, maybe Chris from 3, but none of them come close to Jenny in this movie. It's stated earlier in the film that she's studying to be this child psychology major. And so all that's paid off later. They have this scene, they're going to have this one last night out on the town, and it's Ned and her and Paul, and they're getting drunk, and Jenny's talking in that bar scene about how Jason was probably, secluded and had no interaction with any other human beings, until his mom was decapitated. What that would do, the effect that would have on someone. But all that's paid off there at the end, where Jason's chasing her and she gets into his lair, sees Pamela Voorhees' sweater and puts it on, starts talking like Pamela Voorhees. Jason, mother's talking to you. And you just see the look on his face as he looks at her. And that is just done so smartly in this movie. And I also like how certain things are set up in this film. Earlier in the movie, we see this POV shot from Jason, and Muffin the dog comes walking up to his boots, and then there's a fast cut, and the next scene is of hot dogs on the grill. And I love that. But the very next shot is of Jenny cutting wood with a chainsaw, which she then throws on the fire for the grill. And that's paid off later in the movie when she grabs that chainsaw and starts fighting back against Jason. And I thought that was really smart. A lot of foreshadowing in that scene. The rest of the cast in this are pretty good. I like Mark and Vicky and the little romance they have there. The guy in the wheelchair and the naive girl. Then they try to do a romance there with Terry and Scott, but they're taken out way too soon in the movie for that to even take effect. And I really like Jason in this movie. In the rest of the movies, Jason's this indestructible thing. But in this movie, he's in overalls and a flannel shirt. He's got the burlap sack over his head. He really has a hard time taking down Paul. And I like that he's just a little bit more vulnerable in this. He has that long scene there with Jenny at the end where there's probably like 5 to 10 minutes where it's just them running through the dark. And, she kicks him in the nuts. And he tries to dive at her and misses. So it just shows that he's not indestructible. At least they hadn't envisioned him as that at this point. The camp in this movie is probably my favorite camp, the Packanack Lodge. It's a shame it's actually been torn down, and I think maybe there's condos or houses or something there now. It's a shame somebody didn't go in and restore that because, yeah, it's just an iconic camp, and I love most of the scenes that are shot there. Harry Manfredini's score is pretty similar to the first one in this movie, but I really like both of those. The best kill, without a doubt, possibly in the entire franchise, is Mark, the handicapped guy in the wheelchair, where he's sitting there minding his own business, waiting for Vicky to come back, and they're gonna, get it on. And he catches the cleaver in the face and rolls backwards down the steps. That is so wrong, and I shouldn't laugh at somebody in that condition getting killed in that way. But it's so horrifying, so terrible, you can't help but laugh at it. Poor Mark, he was about to get lucky there, and it was cut short in the worst way. But the other kill in this movie that I wanted to talk about was the double penetration kill of Jeff and Sandra in the bedroom. I think that had been done in a movie before in the 70s, but this was done so well here. I wish it hadn't been butchered by the MPAA and we could have seen everything there. And I like the reveal when Vicky comes in and finds both of them, and then Jason sets up, with that one eye coming into frame. Just a great shot. The whole final part there between Jason and Jenny, I really like, where he's chasing her through the dark. And I like the scene where she gets in her Volkswagen Bug, and it's got the rag top. And he pops up all of a sudden, and then he tries to stab her through the hood of the thing, through the rag top. And it's just a great scene. The scene there where she pees herself, when the mouse walks, everybody's like, was that the mouse or was that her? But that mouse was nowhere near the foot of that bed, So that was a great scene right there. That, she is the final girl, but she's not just this totally brave Ellen Ripley type character. She does get scared. But something that's in that sequence there that I want to talk about is actually covered in Crystal Lake Memories. If you guys haven't seen this is a great documentary. And in this documentary, it's talked about how when Steve Dash was playing Jason, because he was played by both Warren Gillette and Steve Dash in this, he did the scene there in Jason's lair with the pickaxe and the sweater and everything. And the story goes, as he tells it, that Jenny was supposed to bring down the machete, as soon as he raised the pickaxe, but she got a little overzealous and she caught him on the finger while he was still turned. So he ended up having to go into the hospital to get stitches, but not before they shot the scene where Jenny brings the machete down into his shoulder. So here Steve Dash comes into the emergency room with a machete halfway into his shoulder. And he comes up to him and says, I've got this terrible headache. Can you guys get me some aspirin? But yeah, Steve Dash, rest in peace, sir. He seems like he was a really cool guy, had some really good stories. And if you guys haven't seen this, be sure and seek this one out. Now, as far as bugaboos that I have with this movie, and there are a couple, the main one is Alice in the beginning. You've got her, and she's talking on her phone, and she opens the fridge, and she sees Pamela Voorhees' head in there. Jason comes up behind her with an ice pick and kills her, before the credits even roll. What bugs me about that scene is, you've got this simpleton, Jason, and how does he know where Alice lives? And then, he's never been away from Crystal Lake, hardly ever in his life, and he's been there for years. So, why would he venture outside of there? He'd do it later in part 8, which is getting ridiculous by that point. But, that scene, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I actually skip that scene when I play this movie. I skip it, to that first scene where Jeff and Sandra are going up the hill toward the camp, and it's a much more enjoyable movie for me that way. You've got Adrienne King, who was given nothing to do. She didn't even know she was going to die in that scene. She's basically improvising. And I don't like the way it was acted. I don't like the way it was scripted. Just don't like that part at all. And it does drag the score down just a little bit for me. And my other bugaboo about this movie, and it's not really that bad, it's just you could tell they were stretching for time, trying to pad out the movie, is when Vicky's getting ready for Mark. She goes off to her cabin and she gets these panties and puts them on. And she's looking for a brush and she's spraying herself down, even down there for some reason. And, and comes back and sees everything that's happening. And it just seems to me like that scene went on for maybe 30 seconds to a minute too long. You cut some of that out. It's kind of like in The Prowler, if you've ever seen that movie where the main girl's just going from room to room. And it's just like, cut that out and we wouldn't have missed anything. There's one more scene in this movie that a lot of people might see as a negative, but I actually kind of like it. and that is what happened to Paul in this movie. You know, you've got that last scene there where, they think Jason's at the front door and they open the door and Muffin actually comes through. And then Jason comes through the window and actually grabs Jenny and it fades to white. So we never see what happens to Paul. And a lot of people don't like that. But you know me and like Total Recall and movies like that, I love ambiguous endings. And so the question of what happened to Paul, if you just answered that, it'd be okay. But the fact that we don't know what happened to Paul, I like that fact even more. Is he still out there? Is he dead? It doesn't bother me in the slightest. But other than that big dislike and that little dislike, there's not too much that I don't like about Friday the 13th Part 2. As I said, it is by far my favorite movie in the franchise. We'll get to my number 2 and number 3 here in a little bit. But yeah, this movie right here, this is one, to me, Friday the 13th kind of kicked off slashers, but this is kind of where the formula really took place, like this and Halloween 2. Just often people, one by one, in a dark house or a dark camp. And when I was thinking about what I was going to rate this, I wanted to go 8. And then I'm thinking about that scene with Alice in the beginning and how it just doesn't even belong in this movie. So I'm going to take it down to a 7.9. This is going to be the highest rated movie in the entire franchise for me at 7.9. But yeah, guys, Friday the 13th Part 2 is just a masterclass in horror and slasherdom to me. And if you're going to get into the genre, if you're watching Drew Reviews and you're mainly here for the action reviews, yeah, check out 1 and 2. But definitely look at 2, study 2, and just all the things that are just brilliantly set up early in the movie to pay off in that final act. So guys, I'd like to thank you for watching this review of what's quite possibly my favorite slasher of all time. And coming up next, of course, we have Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. I do like it. It's a fun movie. It won't rate nearly as high as this. But if you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, I've been Andrew, and I'll see you down the line.